Welcome to the latest edition of the Kellen Association's Unplugged podcast. Today is a special episode. We're joined by Maria Teresa, Managing Director of Kellen Europe, but also Travis Rush, who is the CEO of Kellen. And so this is a great opportunity to look at associations from the US perspective, but from the European Association perspective as well. What can the two continents, the two association landscapes learn from each other? So, Maria Teresa, you're based in Europe, but as a part of a US company. Is it very different running a European association versus running a US one?
Look, I think there are similarity and differences. In Europe, trade associations are really focused on public affairs, advocacy and interest representation. So the environment and the landscape is extremely dynamic. I think Travis would speak about maybe for the US, but here really the fact is you need to be extremely valuable and relevant for your members. You need to have strategic advocacy and campaigning that are really impactful. And there is a preference in Europe for the common interest representation by a trade association compared to direct representation by a single company. So there is still a preference for the collective representation of an industry, of a sector by a trade association, by both corporation and also national association. And on the other side, the trade association need really to be relevant to their members. And I see an evolution into how they are governed, into their governance, into their engagement with the members, and into their strategic and advocacy strategies.
Great, wonderful. Travis, thanks for joining us. Does Kellen have a model, let's say a set of SOPs for association management that apply in the US and can apply in Europe as well?
Paul, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. We're fans of the podcast back in America, so I'll be able to send this around to all my friends and colleagues. So looking forward to it. As Maria Teresa said, there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of differences. I can't say that there's a playbook that applies universally to associations in both the U.S. and Europe. There are differences, and there's a difference in approach. The easy one to point to from an American standpoint is we tend to like to try to do things bigger and bolder, and despite being nonprofits, we bring a business lens to most trade associations in terms of how we can increase revenue or diversify revenue and do things like that. The flip side is often U.S. associations can lose their focus or thread, especially when it comes to issues and lobbying that the European associations, I think, do a much better job at staying focused and staying on point. And also, as Maria Teresa said, we have a number of companies, member companies in the U.S. that will take the lead more often in place of the association on some of that lobbying and issues management.
I wonder, because I've been in situations where I'm having conversations with board members about expanding or introducing new initiatives, even though board members will be business people, often in Europe at least, they're reluctant to talk about money, or there's the idea that because it's a non-profit, we need to be not focused on making profit. And I guess that's different in the US. Do you think that this approach, which is still common in Europe, can lead to a bit of complacency and not being in a position where you have a proper sustainable revenue model?
Certainly it can. I think there are, and one of the unique perspectives that we have at Kellen in managing associations both in the Europe and in the US and more globally as well, we get to see kind of what works best in each place and take the things that work the best and be able to provide guidance to our boards to try to avoid complacency or, fallacies that might get into the board's mindset or the groupthink, if you will, at the board level, because that can happen no matter where a board is located or what the issues are, what the programming mix is. So I think it's one of the key things that Kellen as a company and our global perspective brings to our boards to avoid some of those things that otherwise can creep in kind of no matter what.
And it can happen in the US or in Europe.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. We're talking about trends in association management. I think one of the trends is in association leadership, where there's more of an expectation now that this is a profession and that a director general should be able to outline the strategy and really align the board members and go in that direction rather than being in a more reactive or responsive position. Is that something that you see happening?
Absolutely, Paul. I think this is the evolution I was speaking about. Being an executive director in a trade association is becoming a real profession. You need to be a leader. You need to drive the association towards the success, and you also need to be much more proactive than before. And we can see a lot of executive director or other members of the staff in the secretariat being proactive. They do videos, they engage their members through social media. The digital transformation is key. So also the executive director and the staff of the association, they need to be there because digital transformation is not negotiable anymore. We need to look at how association can work with AI, cloud technology. Everything is automated now. Even accounting, everything goes through an automation, and we need to be there. Trade association need to be there. And the advantage in Kellen as well is that we are investing into operations massively in both sides of the Atlantic, actually, in order to make sure that we can be more effective. We are investing into training and mentoring our staff and coaching them so that they can become the leader of the future in the trade association that we manage. Another important element, I think, that where trade associations are evolving is strategic foresight. Industry is changing very, very rapidly, and trade association should change in order to follow and shift into the needs of their members to continue to remain relevant and valuable, to bring value to the members. In Kellen, we have tools and strategy that we use in order for the trade association to have this strategic foresight. I think I have mentioned in others occasion OKRs, so objective key results, that we have it for our trade association actually commonly within the US and in Europe. We are also looking at auditing the effectiveness internally of our tools, our strategy, and how do we serve our trade association.
So when you're looking at OKRs, let's say if we put revenue to one side, because that often won't be the main purpose of a trade association, how do you measure success?
Well, we are trying to look into more metrics or KPIs, and that's the beauty of having OKRs, because when you have an objective, you need to look at this is your objective, this is your result, and you need to measure it. And I think the measurement would become more and more important. I mean, a lot of the board members very often ask us as executive director, how can you prove me that you have, or the association has moved the needles? And you need to have these metrics. So we are looking into data for everything we are going to do, KPIs, whether that's a advocacy campaign, a communication campaign, increasing the revenues, new members, etc. This is key.
Okay, very good. I think, Travis, one thing that you have experience with is just the sustainable revenue model. I mentioned that already. I think that's obviously extremely important. Are we looking at shaking up the association model to a certain extent so that associations are not just dependent on one source of income, whether that is from a big trade event or whether it's just from membership income? Is that something that Kellen can advise on and support?
Absolutely. I think, is it a shakeup? I wouldn't go that far to call it a shakeup. I think revenue diversification clearly has been a major topic for probably at least the last decade. It's picked up post-COVID due to the disruptions that caused in the association industry globally. With that said, I think there are a lot of things about the tried and true membership, events, education type revenue mix that we see commonly in the U.S. as kind of the three big pillars, or two if you just have events and membership, that still work very well. What Kellen can bring to the table due to our breadth and experience is a look at how you can maximize or optimize the existing revenue mix while still having an eye towards the future about what could be coming next. And it gives you a best of both worlds where you're not sacrificing or marginalizing something that seems to be working very well today, but you're also not kind of overcommitting to that same model or that same trajectory indefinitely into the future. And our flexible resources, our expertise, our perspective is really invaluable with our clients. And the clients that we do that work for are extremely fortunate and extremely effective in the outcomes that they've had, especially over the last 10 years.
What do you think is one of the biggest obstacles to an association considering taking on an association management company?
I think Maria Teresa and I probably have similar opinions on this. From my perspective, it really does come down to kind of an emotional buy-in, if you will, from at the board level. There is an emotional connection to a sense of independence or identity that there's quite frankly a misconception that can be lost within Kellen or within a consultancy model. And so that's the biggest objection. Once we can get over that hurdle, everything else becomes a lot easier, and it becomes more of a true business decision where you're just, like any other decision, you're looking at apples to apples. But that's a big hurdle to get over.
What do you say to convince somebody who is concerned about losing their independence, let's say as a board member of an association, not for them in particular, but for the association itself?
I typically say, don't take my word for it. Talk to any one of my 100 customers who in some cases have been with the company for 60 plus years and see what their experience has been and see if it lines up with what some of your fears might be.
Very good. I would imagine that in Europe, when you're talking about association management, people don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what an AMC is.
Well, yes and no, I would say. I think in Brussels, people understand what does it mean, but it's not as spread out and as a knowledge as maybe in the US. And actually, the number of association management company in Europe are much less than in the US. So that already gives an idea. But I think in terms of value that we bring to a trade association, this is huge as association management company. There is the knowledge and the expertise, the pool of talent that we can bring. But also something very important is the investment that we as a company, we can have on operations, on learning and coaching of people, talent acquisition and attraction. And another element I think trade association don't have is cultures and values. We in Kellen have spent a lot of time to create a culture and create value for our people, and we continue to invest so that we can impersonalize the values and the culture. But if you are in even a normal trade association with 10 people, and it's difficult to have a culture, it's difficult to have values. But when we are in an association management company like Kellen with almost 200 people at global level, that's something else.
What are the main values of Kellen?
Be ambitious, work together, and master the art of the outcome. Master the art of the outcome is near and dear to my heart because it's very easy in the association field and the association work, especially at standalone or independent associations, that can it be conducive to more of an insular view or mindset to get lost in kind of action for action's sake, right? And so you're going through the motions, so to speak, of executing all the things in front of you without a clear eye on what the purpose is, what the outcome needs to be, how do you really hit that ROI of membership or the OKRs that your organization has. And so we've spent a lot of time internally with all 200 plus people that work at Kellen in aligning our values and culture around don't lose sight of what the outcome is. There's a lot of different things that have to go on. There's many, many things that go in, many, many people. It is a true team sport. But if we're all kind of rowing together and with the clear outcome in mind, good things happen.
Okay, fine. So just because the, let's say, activity side of running an association can be so intense, and I find that people at associations are often in response mode where there's all sorts of different member requests and it's just a case of getting everything done, that as a result of that, you lose the bigger picture. You lose the point of, okay, what are we actually trying to achieve here and how do we measure that?
That's right.
Maria Teresa, do you take this point that in Europe, associations, while they might be less ambitious than US associations in the sense of wanting to get bigger for the sake of getting bigger, but the other side of that is that they're more focused and as a result can be more effective?
Absolutely. I mean, I cannot really speak for the US, but in Europe, I think trade associations are extremely effective. And it is more important in the future to be even more impactful and more valuable to the members. So effectiveness, we have actually a nice tool we are developing, which is called the Health Check, which is looking really at an audit of different elements of the operations of a trade association. So it's secretariat and governance, and we are also looking at effectiveness in terms of strategic foresight, advocacy, communication, campaigning. So everything's related to how can an association be more effective? Because with the current geopolitics and the economic situation in which we are and in which we will be in the near future, company and also national association, but mainly corporation, will be more looking at how much can I invest in a trade association and how much am I going to get out of it. So the value for money would be even more important for the European Association, but also for the national association, which are actually also funded by the corporation. So we, as a trade association, we need to adapt much faster to the changing environment and the changing needs of our members. If members come to me and say, hey, MT, there is a new piece of legislation, we need to be on that, I would ask my staff, just leave everything and get on that, because we have the ability to also onboard additional, professionals that are there that could support and help. And that's, I think, what corporations are expecting trade association to do. And so prioritization of different issues is becoming more relevant.
And are associations still the main vehicle for advocacy in Europe? Because I see a lot of companies hiring their internal public affairs function. There's more lobbying activity, more companies doing that. Are associations still the main game in town when it comes to lobbying?
Absolutely. I think so. I think corporations are having their own agency. A corporate level is really to understand what's going on and then also support them for their corporate goals. But in terms of collectively representing, so promoting and defend one sector of one industry, trade associations are still the key players. And this is also because a lot of politicians, members of the European Parliament, national government officials, and the people, officials in the European Commission, they rather prefer to speak with one partner, one body, which is the trade association, compared to speaking to a million of corporations that might have different point of view. So our role as a trade association executive director is also to facilitate consensus. And that's not easy, of course, as you can imagine, because sometimes you also have different interests and different views. And that's where innovative way of communicating and advocating are very important.
Facilitating consensus while at the same time not working with the lowest common denominator type of reasoning, right?
Absolutely, okay. Absolutely.
I still don't know how to do that, but
well, it's very difficult. Again, it's very complex. I think you need to. What I do normally is to speak to all the different members and really try to understand what is how this piece of legislation is relevant, how is impacting them, and then come back all together. Okay, we have our guardrail of competition law compliance, so that's absolutely vital. But you need to remain effective. I know a lot of, when you go into a call, for example, I know exactly what I want to get out of it, because I know that the members, if they have 1 hour to spend with me, I need to get the maximum out of it.
But as I said that, I think I realized what the key component is to finding that balance. And that's leadership, essentially, right? So it's not just responding to what the members are doing, but it's also bringing something to the table as well.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Travis, final question. I think young people, don't consider a career in associations, not in Europe. I mean, people are not going to university to study, okay, how do I develop a career in associations? In terms of you developing your talent pipeline at Kellen, do you have any initiatives to really encourage this, spread the positivity, spread the good vibes about how beneficial it can be to work for an association management company?
We don't have educational curriculum around associations in the U.S. either. Yep. So that is a challenge where people don't go to school for association management or to learn the skills and the art of association, not only management, but as you said, leadership. That's something that we do provide kind of on-the-job training for. Obviously, I wouldn't be here, Maria Teresa wouldn't be here if we weren't very bullish on associations and the power of associations and the future of associations. So that's stitched into our entire company's fabric. Everything that we do, we see a ton of potential there. And people that come in and join and really want to be a part of that, whether they're coming in from their first day after their education ends, or after a career in something totally different and shift into this space or something adjacent. Once you come into Kellen, there is a track, a layering system of opportunities to work with different types of organizations, different types of people, and learn the skills necessary to get to ultimately a leadership position. There's a lot of on-the-job training that goes into that. It's not out of a book for the most part, but we have this incredible opportunity with 100+ global clients and these perspectives across numerous industries to get people that if this is something that you do kind of see the light of and you want to be a part of associations, I don't think there's a better place in the world than to work at Kellen.
I think you'd agree. As a career, it's a very well-kept secret.
That's correct. Look, actually, just to build on what Travis was saying, in Brussels, we are developing a Kellen Academy to support some of, the internal training for our staff. That includes, advocacy, governance, bylaws, competition law compliance. And we are having KSS, so knowledge sharing session also with our colleague in the US, so they can also share because, for example, governance is a little bit different. So there are similarities, but also differences. And that's what is the value of working with Kellen.
Maria Teresa, Travis, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.